They said my cabin was illegal. 30 days to tear it down or pay $500 a day. I remember standing on that porch, the one my grandfather built in 1882, staring at that red notice taped to the door. I didn't feel fear, just something colder. Someone wanted to erase my family's history, and they thought I'd let them. That morning was like any other in the mountains. Mist in the valley, smell of pine and wood smoke. But then came that envelope with the HOA seal notice of violation, signed by Camille Stratton, president of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. According to her, my cabin violated architectural standards, color schemes, even roof pitch. Never mind the fact that it was built decades before the state of Colorado existed. At first, I thought it was some mistake. My property had always been outside their boundaries. Then I saw the new map they'd redrawn the lines in 2021, quietly, without any notice. And suddenly, I was inside their jurisdiction. I sat there staring at the letter, realizing this wasn't an invitation to talk. It was an ultimatum. That night, I pulled out my grandfather's old steamer trunk. Inside were the family papers, land patents from 1882, tax receipts from the 1950s, survey maps older than most towns around here. Proof that this cabin and the ground beneath it belonged to us long before any HOA existed. I spent the next few days reading property law, learning more about superior title, a legal term meaning my ownership predated state authority. It meant their rules couldn't touch me, at least not legally. But knowing you're right and proving it are two very different things. So I set up a meeting with Camille. She was already waiting when I arrived, sharp suit, sharper smile. "Mr. Holloway," she said, motioning to a chair. "Let's get to the point. Your structure is non-compliant. It must be removed." I slid the original deed across the table. "This cabin was built before your bylaws, before the county, before the state. You have no jurisdiction." Camille didn't even glance at it. "Sentiment doesn't override regulation," she said flatly. "You became part of Meadowbrook Heights when the boundary expanded in 2021. I kept my voice calm. There's no record of that expansion being approved. Her tone cooled another degree. The board voted unanimously. That's all that's required. It wasn't, and she knew it. But she wasn't here to debate, she was here to intimidate. I left that meeting feeling smaller than I'd like to admit. Maybe I was being stubborn. Maybe it really was time to let go of the past. That night, I sat by the fire reading one of my grandfather's journals. A line caught my eye. "Paper fades. Stone endures." He'd written about setting granite cornerstones at the edges of our property, each carved with an H and the year 1882. Proof, he said, that our claim would outlast any mistake a surveyor could make. I hadn't thought about those stones in years, but now they felt like my last lifeline. The next morning, I went out with a shovel and a metal detector. After an hour of digging in frozen dirt, I hit something solid, a chunk of granite, rough and gray, carved with that same H 1882. I found all four before dusk. My grandfather's words echoed in my head. Stone endures. I called a property rights attorney named Miranda Thier. She specialized in historical preservation cases. After looking through my documents, she nodded. "If we verify those cornerstones with a surveyor, you've got them beat. Their boundary change isn't just invalid, it's fraud." And that's exactly what it was. The county clerk confirmed it the next day. The HOA's so-called map had never been approved. No hearing, no surveyor seal, no commissioner signature. Just a self-filed document shoved in a drawer, fraudulent from start to finish. We filed a formal response to the HOA. Within 48 hours, they called a public meeting. Camille opened the session with a slideshow of my cabin ugly, unflattering angles and a speech about safety hazards and property values. Then she pointed at me in front of everyone. "Mr. Holloway refuses to comply," she said. "He's lowering the value of every home in Meadowbrook Heights." I stood, voice steady. "This cabin predates your entire community. It's protected by federal law, and your boundary expansion was never legal." Someone in the back spoke up, an older woman. "That cabin's been here longer than any of us. Are we really tearing down history because it doesn't match our paint colors?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Camille's smile tightened. "This meeting is adjourned." I thought that was the end of it. Then an anonymous email arrived the next morning. "Camille has financial ties to Pine Valley Developments. They've been after your land for years." That changed everything. A few days later, the HOA treasurer, a nervous man named Griffin, approached me in a coffee shop. He looked around before speaking. "She's been working with the developer," he whispered. "They want your 5 acres for a luxury build. Camille gets a 12% commission if she forces you to sell." He slid me a USB drive, emails, contracts, the works. Just don't say it came from me. Inside were 47 emails between Camille and the developer's CEO, plans to redraw the map. Messages like, "Apply pressure until he folds." One even said, "If he won't sell, we'll condemn the property. I've got a county inspector who owes me." Miranda's jaw clenched when she saw them. "We're not just defending your cabin anymore," she said. "We're bringing her down." We filed a motion to dismiss the violation based on fraud and conflict of interest and sent copies to the district attorney. Within days, the story broke in the local news. HOA president under investigation for property scheme. The following week, Camille vanished from meetings. When the board finally gathered again, her chair sat empty. The secretary's voice shook as she read the statement President Stratton has stepped aside pending investigation. But I knew this wasn't over. The DA called me soon after. They'd found evidence that Pine Valley had pulled the same stunt in 3 other counties. At least 5 victims had lost their land. I was the first to fight back hard enough to expose it. 3 months later, the court hearing began. Miranda stood beside me, calm as stone. She presented the original land patent, the verified survey, the fraudulent boundary map, and the email trail linking Camille to the developer. The judge listened silently, flipping through documents. Then she looked up and said, "The HOA has no jurisdiction over Mr. Holloway's property. The violation notice is void. All fines dismissed, and this matter is referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation." Camille didn't show up that day, but she couldn't hide forever. A few months later, she and the developer were indicted on charges of fraud, forgery, and racketeering. I testified before a grand jury, then again at trial. The defense tried to paint it as a misunderstanding. My client was only protecting community standards, they said. But the jury saw through it through the greed, the manipulation, the fake maps, and backroom deals. When the verdict came, I barely breathed. Guilty on all counts. Camille Stratton, 18 years in federal prison. The developer, 12. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just felt still, like the mountain itself had exhaled. After the trial, the new HOA board met for the first time. They voted to officially recognize my cabin as a historical landmark, not to control it, but to protect it. They apologized publicly, and I accepted privately. I drove home that night through the valley snow just starting to fall. The cabin stood waiting, warm light in the windows. I sat by the fire and read my grandfather's journal one last time. Heavy snow last night, but the cabin held. It always holds. He was right. It did hold against weather, against time, against people who thought power gave them ownership of everything they saw. And as the flames flickered low, I realized something simple. Some things are worth fighting for. Not because they're old, but because they're true.